Story number 1: Dock Maintenance. I was finishing the closing paperwork when he showed up. 8 o'clock, maybe 8:05. I remember, because I'd already locked the front gate and was thinking about the drive home, about whether I'd have time to grab something to eat before the grocery store closed. He came around the side of the office building. I saw him through the window first, a man in his 40s, maybe early 50s, wearing jeans and a plain gray polo shirt. No company logo. He had his phone in his hand and was looking at the marina like he was checking something against a map or a photo. When I opened the door, he smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to look friendly. "Emma," he said. "Sorry I'm late. Schedule got confused on my end." I didn't correct him about using my first name. The owner, Mr. Hendricks, probably gave him my contact information when he called to confirm the appointment. That made sense. That's what you do when you hire someone to work on the property. "You're the dock contractor?" I asked. "Yeah, just need to check the structural posts before it gets dark. Shouldn't take long." He was already looking past me toward the marina. "You got a work order for me, or?" "I should have something in the system," I said. I was already turning back to my desk, but he waved his hand. No, I've got everything in my notes. Don't worry about it. Just need to know which slip is yours so I don't bother anyone." I paused. That was a strange question. Why would he need to know which boat was mine? "I don't really keep a boat here," I said. "I just work in the office." He nodded like that was fine, like he'd already known that or didn't care. Then he looked toward the employee dock, the one that runs along the eastern side of the marina, the one I hadn't pointed out to him, and started walking that direction. I stood in the doorway for a second, watching him move past the fuel station and toward the water. No toolbox, no equipment bag, just his phone and his jeans, and that gray shirt that could have belonged to anyone. The smell hit me then. The thick, warm smell of algae and gasoline mixing in the humid air. Lake Michigan in summer. It's usually something I don't even notice anymore, but right then it felt heavy, suffocating. I went back inside and locked the door. I told myself I was being paranoid. Probably was. But something about the way he'd asked which slip was mine, the way he'd started walking toward the employee dock without me telling him where it was, something about that made my hands feel cold. I moved to the window and watched him. He was on the dock now, walking slowly past each slip. He wasn't looking at the posts or the pilings or anything structural. He was looking at the boats, at each one individually. He stopped at a few of them, raising his phone, taking photographs. Not quick snapshots. He was taking his time with each one, angling the phone, getting different shots. My chest felt tight. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Hendricks. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail again. I texted him. "Contractor here. Need to verify appointment." Then I waited. The man was still on the dock. He'd moved to the middle section now, the slips where the larger boats were moored. He was photographing them methodically. Methodically. That was the word that kept coming to mind. My phone buzzed. Mr. Hendricks calling back. "Emma, what's wrong?" "There's a contractor here," I said. "Says he's here to check the structural posts." He showed up about 10 minutes ago, 2 hours late, but he knew my name and... "What contractor?" "The dock maintenance one. The one you hired." There was a pause. "I didn't hire anyone, Emma. Maintenance isn't scheduled until next week." The world went very still. "He's here right now," I said. My voice sounded strange to me. Thin. "He's on the employee dock. He's taking pictures of the boats. Lock the office. I'm calling the police." Stay inside. I locked the door. I was already inside, but I locked it anyway, even though it was already locked. Then I went to the emergency kit mounted on the wall and took out the boat horn. It was heavy. Brass and rubber. I set it on the desk in front of me and kept watching through the window. The man had finished with the middle section. He was moving toward the north slip now, the one where the sailboats were. He was still taking photographs, still methodical, still calm. Then he stopped. He turned and looked directly at the office window. At me. We were maybe 80 feet apart, far enough that I couldn't see his face clearly, but close enough that I knew he could see me. He just stood there on the dock, phone in his hand, looking at the office, looking at me in the window. He didn't move. He didn't wave or gesture or do anything. He just looked. The seconds stretched, 5 of them, 10. Then he turned and started walking back toward the parking lot. Not quickly. Not like he was running. Just walking. Like he'd decided he was done. I watched him disappear around the corner of the fuel station. I watched the parking lot through the other window. I saw him walk past the empty spaces, past my car, past the gate. Then he was gone. The police arrived in 8 minutes. 2 officers. They searched the parking lot and the marina grounds and found nothing. No van, no equipment. Nothing. But an hour later, they found his van parked at the hiking trail access point, nearly a mile away on the other side of the property line. They found marina layout maps printed on the passenger seat. Detailed maps, multiple copies. And they found a duffel bag in the back with zip ties and duct tape and a flashlight, but they didn't find him. The police said he probably heard the sirens coming and ran into the woods. They searched for 3 hours with flashlights and dogs, but the woods are dense there, and it was dark, and he knew the property better than they did, better than any of us did. Mr. Hendricks offered to let me work from home for a while, but I came back after 2 weeks. I needed the job. I needed things to feel normal again. But I notice things now that I didn't notice before. I notice when cars park in the lot and sit there with the engine off. I notice when people walk the docks at night. I notice the sound of the water and the algae smell and the way the darkness comes early to the marina because of all the trees. Sometimes I think about those photographs he was taking, about which boats he was photographing, about why he needed to know which slip was mine. I never found out his name. The police never identified him. The van was registered to a rental company, and the rental had been made with a fake ID. After a few weeks, the investigation just sort of stopped. He was gone, and there was no crime to prosecute, so eventually everyone moved on. But I'm still here, still closing the office at 8 o'clock, still watching the parking lot. And sometimes, when I'm the last one here, I wonder if he's watching too. Story number 2, graduation party. I've been replaying the afternoon in my head since around midnight, and I can't stop thinking about the way he looked at my kitchen. The cookout was supposed to be simple. Sarah, one of my former students, had graduated 2 weeks ago, and she'd been kind to me during the separation. She'd check in, ask how I was doing, not in a pitying way, but genuinely. So when she mentioned wanting to celebrate with a small group, I said yes. A few neighbors, her parents, her sister. Nothing complicated. Just burgers and beer in the backyard of this rental house I'd moved into in March, a 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet cul-de-sac in New Jersey that still doesn't feel like mine. It was around 4:30 when he came through the side gate. I remember the charcoal smoke was thick that afternoon, drifting in through the open sliding door. I was focused on the grill, turning burgers, listening to Sarah's father tell a story about his golf league. The man just appeared on the patio in a navy polo shirt, khaki shorts, the kind of casual outfit that fits in anywhere. He introduced himself as David, Sarah's uncle, said she'd posted the address on Instagram, and told him to come by if he was in the area. I didn't think twice about it. You don't. Someone says they know someone you know, and you accept it. I shook his hand, told him to grab a beer from the cooler, and went back to the grill. He was fine at first. Better than fine. He asked good questions about my teaching. Seemed interested in the school district. Complimented the neighborhood. He fit in. That's what made the next part so easy to miss. Around 5:15, he excused himself to use the bathroom inside. I didn't watch him go. I was plating food. But I remember noticing when he came back out, maybe 10 minutes later, that he'd been inside longer than made sense. Not dramatically longer, just long enough that I registered it. Long enough that some part of me noticed. He came back to the grill, and we were talking about the weather, about summer plans, and he said something like, "You've got a nice setup in there. Really organized kitchen." I said thanks. Then he asked, "You keeping it all to yourself now, or do you have family staying with you?" It was a normal question, but the way he asked it wasn't. It was too specific, too interested. I told him it was just me for now, and he nodded like he was filing that away. The afternoon went on. More neighbors came by. Sarah's family was there, her mom and dad and sister. Everything was normal, but I kept noticing him. The way he'd look at the house. The way he'd positioned himself to see through the sliding door into the kitchen, into the hallway. Once I caught him looking at the side gate, at the fence line, at the way the property was laid out. By 7 o'clock, people started leaving. Sarah's family packed up first. The neighbors headed home, and David stayed. He stayed, and he helped me clean up, and he asked me what time I usually got home from school, whether I had a regular schedule during summer break. He asked it casually, while we were wiping down the patio table, but I heard the real question underneath. He was mapping my routine. That's when something inside me shifted from comfortable to wrong. I can't explain it better than that. There was no single moment where he did something overtly threatening. But the accumulation of small things, the bathroom visit, the questions about the kitchen, the interest in my schedule, the way he'd looked at my gate, it all added up to something that made my skin feel tight. I told him I had an early morning, which was a lie. He said he should head out anyway. We walked toward the front door, and I was thinking about how to get him to leave faster, and then my phone buzzed. I'd texted my department head 15 minutes earlier with a message that said, "Call me with an emergency in 10 minutes. He came through. I answered the call, let him talk for a few seconds, then said, "Yeah, okay, I'll head over there now." I looked at David and said, "I'm sorry. I've got to go help a colleague." "It was good to meet you." He nodded, and we walked to his car. A gray sedan, 4-door, parked 3 houses down the street. He got in, and I stood in my driveway until he drove away. I didn't sleep well that night. Around 9, Sarah texted me. She said, "Hey, my mom said my uncle came to your thing." That's weird because I don't have an uncle named David. My mom's side is all sisters, and my dad's side is just his brother Tom, and he's in California. I read that text 3 times. At midnight, I pulled up my doorbell camera footage. I scrolled back through the afternoon, watched the people arriving and leaving, watched the smoke drifting across the patio. Then I kept scrolling into the evening, into the dark. At 11:47, the gray Sudden pulled up across the street from my house. It idled there for 6 minutes. The interior light was on. I could see a figure in the driver's seat, and his arm was moving, up and down, like he was looking at something in his lap, like he was reviewing photos on a phone. At 11:53, he drove away. I didn't call the police. I know how that sounds, but what would I tell them? A man came to my party, asked normal questions, looked at my house. He took pictures of my kitchen. He asked about my schedule. None of it is illegal. None of it is proof of anything. This morning, I went out to check the back gate. It's the kind that swings inward, with a latch mechanism that should lock automatically. This morning, there was a small pebble wedged into the latch, wedged in so it couldn't fully close. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to prevent it from locking. I don't know how long it's been there. I don't know if he put it there during the bathroom visit, or if it was something else entirely. I don't know what he was photographing on that phone at midnight, or if it was even photographs at all. What I know is that he's not a ghost. He's not a coincidence. He's real, and he was here, and he wanted to know things about me that I didn't volunteer. And I don't know what he's planning to do with what he learned. Story number 3, Sunset Hike. I was shooting golden hour light on the red sandstone formations when I first saw him. He came up the trail from the South Fork, lean and efficient in running gear despite the heat. He nodded at me politely, the way hikers do, and kept moving toward the overlook's edge. I remember thinking he wasn't sweating, which seemed odd given the temperature, but I didn't dwell on it. I was focused on the way the sun was hitting the canyon walls. That specific angle of light that only lasts maybe 15 minutes before it shifts and ruins everything. I packed up my tripod around 5:15 in the afternoon and took the eastern fork toward the second overlook. It's a longer route, maybe 20 minutes of hiking, and I wanted to catch the light hitting the formations from a different angle. The trail wound through a narrow section where the canyon walls closed in, and I remember feeling that pleasant solitude you get when you're alone in a big landscape. Just me and the rock and the sound of my boots on the packed earth. When I reached the second overlook, he was already there. He had a small tripod set up, the kind you'd use for a phone or a compact camera. He was adjusting something on it, making minute corrections, but there was no camera mounted on it, no phone. Just him, standing there with his hands on the tripod, looking out at the canyon. He glanced at me briefly, acknowledged my presence with a slight turn of his head, then went back to whatever he was doing. I told myself he must know a shortcut. He was fast, clearly a serious hiker or runner, and he probably knew the canyon well enough to cut across sections I didn't know about. That was the rational explanation, and I clung to it while I set up my own tripod, maybe 30 feet away from him. We didn't talk. He didn't seem interested in photography, and I wasn't interested in conversation. But I was aware of him in a way that made my shoulders tight. I shot for about 12 minutes. The light was good, but not perfect. I kept one eye on the sun's position and one eye on him. He never took a photo. He just stood there, occasionally adjusting the empty tripod, occasionally looking at his watch. When I started packing up, he was still there, motionless. The third overlook was the closest to the trailhead, maybe a 15-minute hike from where I was. I took the direct route, the most straightforward path, the one that didn't branch or double back. I moved quickly because the sun was dropping fast, and I didn't want to be on the trail after dark. My heart was already beating a little faster than the exertion warranted. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. He was just another hiker. Maybe he liked this canyon and came out here regularly. Maybe he was training for something and did laps through different sections of the trail. I reached the third overlook at 5:50, 8 in the evening. The sun was maybe 20 degrees above the horizon, painting everything in that orange, red light that makes the sandstone glow. I was alone. The overlook was empty. I set up my tripod and started shooting, and I was breathing a little easier because maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I just happened to be at the same places at the same times, and he was somewhere else on the canyon system, doing his own thing. Then I heard footsteps on the trail behind me. Not running footsteps. Walking footsteps, steady and measured. They came around the bend in the trail, and he appeared, and he was barely breathing hard. He looked at me and nodded, the same polite acknowledgement as before, and then he moved to the edge of the overlook, maybe 15 feet away from me. He pulled out his phone and looked at the screen, and then he looked at his watch, and then he looked at me. That's when something in my chest went tight. He wasn't sweating. After hiking 3 different routes through a desert canyon in the heat of late afternoon, he wasn't sweating at all. His shirt was dry. His face was dry. His hair wasn't even damp. I didn't say anything. I just kept shooting, but my hands were shaking slightly, and I had to focus hard on the camera settings to keep my mind from spinning. He didn't move. He just stood there, and I could feel his attention on me, even though he was looking out at the canyon. The sun dropped another few degrees. The light started to go orange, red to deep orange. I told myself I needed to leave. I told myself the hike back would take 15 minutes, and I wanted to do it in daylight. I packed up. I didn't look at him directly, but I was aware of every movement he made. He didn't move. He just watched me fold my tripod and secure my camera bag and shoulder my pack. Then I turned and headed back down the trail toward the trailhead, walking fast, not quite running, my pulse high to my throat. The sun was maybe 10 degrees above the horizon when I reached the parking area. Dusk was settling in that way it does in the desert, where the light doesn't fade gradually, but seems to drop off like a switch being flipped. There were maybe 5 cars in the lot, including mine, a blue Honda CR-V parked in the middle section. His sedan was parked directly behind it. The bumper was close. Not touching, but close enough that I couldn't back out. I could maybe get 3 or 4 feet before hitting him. I stood there for a moment, just looking at it, trying to decide if this was really happening or if I was having some kind of stress response. The parking lot was empty. No one else was around. The ranger station was 2 miles down the access road. I got in my car. I started the engine. I put it in reverse and eased backward until I felt the slight resistance of his bumper. Then I shifted to drive and angled the wheel hard to the left and drove forward onto the grass shoulder. The undercarriage scraped on rocks, a sound that made me wince. But I kept going, kept the wheel turned, kept accelerating until I was clear of both vehicles and pointing toward the access road. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to see if he was standing in the parking lot watching me leave. I just drove fast toward the ranger station, my hands gripping the wheel, my breath coming in short pulls. Halfway there, maybe a mile down the road, my car pulled hard to the right. The tire pressure warning light came on, red and urgent on the dashboard. I felt the steering get heavy, felt the car listing to the right side. I eased off the accelerator and coasted, and the car limped along at maybe 30 miles per hour, the tire deflating audibly now, a soft hissing sound that I could hear over the engine. I made it to the ranger station. I pulled into the lot and sat in the car for maybe 2 minutes, just breathing, just trying to slow my heart down. Then I got out and walked inside. The ranger on duty was a woman in her 50s named Margaret. I told her my tire had gone flat and asked if she could take a look. She walked out with me, and we looked at the front right tire, which was now completely deflated. The sidewall collapsed against the rim. She crouched down and looked at the valve stem. Then she looked at the other 3 tires and crouched down to check each one. When she stood up, her expression had changed. All 4 valve stems had been loosened. Not removed, just loosened enough that the air would escape slowly over time. She showed me, pointing out the slight gap where the stem should be sealed tight. And in the dust around my car, visible in the last light of the day, were boot prints. Multiple sets circling the vehicle, the tread pattern distinctive, a waffle pattern, the kind you see on running shoes. Margaret called the county sheriff. I sat in the ranger station and drank water and tried not to think about how long I'd been on the trail, how long my car had been unattended in that parking lot, how many times he'd walked around it, loosening the stems, making sure I'd make it far enough away before the tires failed. The sheriff arrived 40 minutes later. He took my statement and photographed the boot prints and the valve stems. He asked me to describe the man, and I did, and he said they'd look into it, but his tone suggested they wouldn't find anything. The prints would be too common, the description too vague. There was no crime yet, technically. No assault, no theft. Just a man on a hiking trail and some loosened valve stems. I drove home that night on a spare tire, going slowly, checking my mirrors constantly. I haven't been back to that canyon. I probably won't go back. But sometimes I think about him standing at that 3rd overlook, not sweating, not breathing hard, just waiting for me to finish packing up so he could follow me down to the parking lot. I think about what would have happened if my tire had failed in a different place. A darker place. A place where no one would have heard me call for help. I still don't know his name, or where he came from, or why he chose me. I just know that something about the way he moved, the way he appeared at each overlook, the way he was never out of breath. Something was very wrong with that picture. And I know that Margaret found those boot prints, and I know that the valve stems were deliberately loosened, and I know that none of it was paranoia or coincidence. I know that something real happened out there in that canyon, and I got